Okay, so you're looking at an assets folder here, which will just contain some of the files that we're going to bring in. We might as well bring most of them in at once. So we'll set about doing that this lesson. We'll also take a look at creating the, or not really creating, but exploring the .sks file or a Sprite Kit scene file. So that's what's ahead. And if you haven't already created a new project, go ahead and do that. I'm going to actually have to go over here to New. And then project, there we go. Start all the way back from scratch. There's going to be a game, and it is under the iOS section. Next, we can just call this anything we want, but Maze Game seems appropriate. The language is going to be set to Swift, Game Technology, Sprite Kit, and then Devices, Universal. Okay, and I'll continue with the nasty habit of working right off of my desktop there. Okay, and then right off the bat, let's go ahead and make it so that our device orientation is going to be just landscape left or right. And then let's talk about bringing in some of these image assets. Okay, so neat thing is that if you're working with your own assets in the future, work with mine for now. If you have at 2x followed by the same base name over here, enemy1, right? You can just take them both and drag them both in like that, and it'll put both into their appropriate slots. And the reason you're not actually seeing anything is because these are just transparent PNG files with a white outline. And one kind of neat thing you can do with this the end project here is change the background color to any color you want, and then everything kind of looks, in those two tones, white and whatever the background color is. So fear not if you're not seeing anything inside of here. They are in here. And if you want, you could also put in here your 3x images. I guess I should have thought to do that. Maybe I'll include those in later on. Star field is going to be a background image that we're going to use. Stars, these are going to be little dots or pellets that you eat up. And then any custom fonts that you want to include, you can also put these in here as well. Drop them in. Anytime you get this prompt over here, at the very minimum you want to put in add to targets and then a check mark for the game itself, basically the base target here. Sometimes I just leave off the tests because I never really run those tests. And then we've got an atlas folder, which contains our sequences for the ship moving along. And let's see if I can kind of show that. Might not be too obvious. I should probably pick a different background color for my PNG files, but really all it is just some lines kind of trailing back there. So when you're going to create a .atlas folder, all you have to do is just make any folder without the .atlas, and then you just add .atlas, and it becomes a .atlas folder. And then you put in here your image sequences. Again, they just have to have at 2x for the retina display images. And then we can just dump the whole thing into our project. So just go over here, and of course, same thing, same prompt. Click on finish. And what a lot of people will do is they'll create a group over here, which we don't necessarily have to do, but you could create a group that just says something like texture atlases. And then you can move all of those into there, like so. Just kind of keep things nice and organized. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at some of what has already come with the project, specifically our game scene.sks file. And I think this is one of the big files that everyone is going to want to kind of explore early on. And, well, you're not really seeing anything right there, are you? And if we were to build this right now, we're not going to be really seeing anything derived from the game scene file either. Let's change that, and we'll just play around. And you know what? I realized one thing. I need to go back over here and knock this down to iOS 8, and then that way I can build, although I really should be building on my phone now. I'll just build to any one of these other test devices. We'll go for the 6 Plus. Why not? Okay, here it comes. All right, now you might be thinking, oh, well, wait a minute, that hello world is coming from the SKS file, or maybe that title tag of what do you call it, Maze Game, was coming from there. No, neither one of those is coming from our game scene file. But let's get rid of those while we're thinking about them. So hello world is getting created from our did move to view statement in our game scene .swift file, and these two are working together right now. We don't necessarily have to pull in an SKS file that has the same exact name as gamescene.swift. But what we'll do is we'll kind of treat this as our game engine throughout the course, and I'll show you how or why gamescene.sks is getting loaded in, and then we'll swap it out with a different one later. For right now, though, let's get rid of this. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen the demo by now, but really all that happens here is you click and this spinning spaceship comes on. We'll make our own spaceship. So let's get rid of that. Actually, I guess we could leave in that part of it. And then let's go over here to our launch screen, and this is why we're seeing the title right there. I'm going to get rid of that too, and I'm going to get rid of that copyright, and I'm going to switch the background to being nice, cool black. All right, so this is just going to open up with nothing. All right, nothing at all. And let's prove that. Oh, well, you know what? Our game scene is set to be we're not specifying the background color at all, so it's just black for right now. All right, but that gives us a good opportunity to now go and put something into our SKS file and prove that we're actually seeing it. So let's go ahead and grab out a color sprite, and we'll just drop this in the middle here. If you happen to be using a laptop like me, you can pinch in or out, and it's actually for me, I think it's kind of, oh no, actually it's not counterintuitive anymore, is it? Pinching in goes right, yeah, makes it smaller. Otherwise, you can go and just hit these little buttons over here, and you know, I dragged in a color sprite, and it's already got some color settings in here. If I go and explore it by clicking on the Show SK Node Inspector, we get all sorts of parameters over here, and depending on what you drag in, you're going to get some different ones. And you can kind of pull around, you can play around with this, you can rotate it some inside of here, and of course you see those changes on the side. And then let's build this real fast to see if we do see a red square now. Oh, okay, that's great to see. So let's use this little guy as our kind of test subject here, and let me put his rotation back. We'll call this boundary, and let's go ahead and create an empty node. And this is going to be our parent, and I'll show you what I mean here. We'll call this Maze World. All right, so I've got a sprite on here, and I've got an empty node. Empty node you can think of as just kind of a basic container. It has some simple properties that we could use in Sprite Kit, for example, the position, things like that, the alpha of it. But what we'll do is we'll just kind of treat this as really a container. All right, so I'm going to set the sprite's parent to be Maze World. And you'll notice I get this nice little line over here, which indicates that the two are connected, that this is enclosed within here. So if I were to go and create another color sprite, just make this one blue this time, and set its parent to Maze World, you can imagine what's going to happen. Now, oops, that's actually moving the entire scene. Now if I move Maze World around, you can see that it's got both of them inside of there, and changes I were to make to this would occur to them as well. So for example, let's make it 0.5. You'll see that the alpha is now 40% of what it could be, and that affected all of the nodes inside of it. So you could have other nodes inside of here. You could have sprites inside of here. You could have there's another type that they give us access to, this shape node. That could be within there. And when we set up or when we lay out a potential maze world using our SKS file, we'll do something very similar to this, where we basically just lay out shapes that are going to act as boundaries, and we'll have a parent node called maze world. And we'll do some things like set up a kind of a dummy starting point for the character, for enemies. But this, if you're not familiar with gaming, this might look like it has a lot of potential. I'm a little torn because I think there's some advantages to using a .tmx file to lay out the world. But, for example, one problem here is that, we can identify these objects by their name, right? So we could go into the code and we could find boundary by just simply going self. We don't even need that, actually. We can go child node with name, boundary, and dot position. We could change the position of it programmably right over here, okay, just by simply doing that. But you're kind of locked into this being a sprite node or an SK sprite node. You're locked into this just being this sort of anonymous SK node class, and what we'll end up doing is we'll basically be using these as placeholder objects and replacing them out with our own classes, our own boundary class. So it's not just going to be a sprite node with the name boundary. It's going to be an actual class that we write, and we'll essentially look through every child that is inside of this scene and take them out. We'll replace them with something, but we'll end up taking them out. We'll use things like their position and their width and their height, and then kind of disregard them. Okay. And if you are using an operating system other than Yosemite, you've probably also noticed that moving around inside of this SKS file is nearly impossible. There's huge redraw problems. Fortunately, as you can see, they have solved that with Yosemite. But I know not everybody wants to adopt the latest and greatest operating system the first week. Depending on when you adopt it, looking at using the .tmx file or tiled file is another great alternative to get around having to work inside this environment. So again, pros and also cons, but that should give you an idea of just kind of the hierarchy that we're going to be working with later on, where we have a parent, we have nodes inside of it, and ultimately what we'll end up doing is we'll use Maze World as it'll end up getting centered around the character. So everything inside of the world ends up moving relative to our little hero navigating the scene. So let's go ahead and I'll stop with this initial setup. This just gives you an idea of kind of the Sprite Kit scene or .sks file, and then we'll go back over here and we'll actually work with some code.